Greetings, everyone. This is Professor Theo Williams tuning in to you once again. It is Thursday night. I am filming this because I want to make sure you have this video on Chapter 2 for tomorrow's class. I have an update. As of now, the plan is that we should be done with jury duty tomorrow. That is the plan, so please keep it in prayer because I really do want to get back in the classroom. Once again, remember we don't have class on Monday because of the holiday, but I hope to see you all on Wednesday. And by doing these videos, it's going to keep us on a schedule. When we get back, we'll pick up with those speeches that we talked about, and we'll get back into speaking more about the second part of the speech, or I'll make some adjustments to the schedule. But for the most part, we're kind of going to be where we need to be. We'll just change some things around because we would have been doing some other stuff, but now we're doing chapter 1 and 2 via this video, and then we're going to get into some things we can actually get into on Wednesday. So this video is actually pretty brief. Chapter 2 only has a couple slides that I want to go over. So this is the overview of speech. This is some few things you need to know about when it comes to public speaking. It's basically this list of some steps that are strongly suggested. They're not in concrete, meaning every time you give a speech, you don't necessarily have to do all these steps. But for the purposes of this class and ultimately the purpose of the exam and just in life in general, these are some good steps to follow. I wonder if I were to ask you all before you read the chapter, before you saw these PowerPoints, so you hear me speak right now, if I were to ask you, what do you believe is the first step in public speaking in regards to preparing for a speech? So we have a speech coming up and I said, hey, I want you to get ready for this speech. What would be the first thing you do? By show of hands, how many of you would probably guess that the first thing is to pick your topic? All right, show of hands. Okay, I don't see any hands. Mainly because this is a video. But I'm pretty sure if we were in class and I told you to show me some hands, that most hands would go up. Because it's just a common sense thing. A logical step would be, hey, I need to pick my topic. I want to know what I'm speaking about. However, before you pick your topic, there is another step that makes a lot of sense, but maybe we haven't considered in the past, and that is to analyze your audience. And we're not going to deal too in depth about what it means to analyze your audience at this particular moment. I had to touch my screen, notification came up, my apologies. Because we're going to talk more about analyzing your audience at a later date. That's what's cool about this particular book. A lot of the steps we're going to talk about tonight in this particular video that you'll see tomorrow, these steps are going to have a little bit more in-depth information given at a later date. But analyzing your audience for the all intents and purposes simply means to gather as much information you can about the people you're going to be speaking to. And so you never want to pick your topic and you never want to start preparing your content until you know who's going to be there, who am I speaking to? And that's going to help influence and inform possibly the topic you pick and how you approach your particular speech. So number 1 is analyze your audience. Number 2 is selecting your topic. And once again, I'm going to talk more specifically about some things that you can consider at a later date in terms of how to select a topic. But this is basically when you figure out you know who you're speaking to. Now you want to figure out what are you speaking about. And one of my rules of thumb is I normally try to choose something I'm very confident in, I'm very competent in, something I'm spoken about plenty of times. That way I can maximize my time far as practice and not have to worry about doing as much research on a particular topic. So number 2 is to select your topic. Number 3 may seem redundant when you talk about selecting your topic. And that is to determine the purpose of your speech. But those are two distinct things. The topic is what you are speaking about. The purpose is why you're speaking, or what is it you want to accomplish through speaking. I think this is something that we neglect oftentimes when we engage in public speaking. If we're honest, sometimes it's something we neglect when we engage in normal everyday conversation. We may chime in a conversation, whether it's face to face, whether it's via social media, without really considering what am I trying to accomplish by the words that I'm about to say. And I think oftentimes if we took the time to determine our purpose, it would, number one, either cause us not to speak at that particular moment because we may conclude that there's no real purpose being served, or it would just cause us to be more intentional, more mindful, and more responsible when it comes to public speaking. That we would recognize that if I'm going to say something, let me say something worth saying, and then let me say that thing well. So we got to determine what's the purpose. Is it informative? Are you trying to persuade? Is it a special occasion? Is it a particular event? What's the purpose for your particular public speaking? Number 4, you're going to outline your speech. And once again, we may talk more about possible outlines in the near future. But one thing I will say is even if I'm doing a low pressure situation type speaking engagement, whether it's just 5 to 10 minutes, I'm still going to use some sort of an outline. It just may not be as involved or as well thought out as an outline I may use if I'm speaking for 30 to 40 minutes. At the very least, I'm going to have an outline in my mind about what I want to say, overall, what's my topic. I may develop a few main points, normally 3 main points, and I'll have it in my mind. I'll know what my 3 main points are. And I'll have some type of understanding of how I'm going to open up my speech and the understanding of how I'm going to close my speech. So my outline may not necessarily mean it is totally typed out each time. Sometimes I may just jot something down on a piece of paper. Sometimes I may not jot it all at all. I may just keep it in my mind. But if it is more pressure situation, if it's going to be a longer speech, if it's going to be something that requires a little bit more practice and research, then I will have a little bit more well-developed outline. So we're going to talk about some of those outlines in the future. Number 5, you're going to compose a thesis statement. If you've done any type of writing, especially advanced writing, you would know about thesis statements. When it comes to public speaking, a thesis statement is very similar to a thesis statement you would have in your writing. This is the overall thing that you want the audience to get from your speech. So you say, I am here to speak to you about this particular topic in hopes that you would gain this particular knowledge. That would be your thesis statement. For example, right now, the goal of this particular video is to present information and hopefully further your understanding on Chapter 2, an overview to speaking. And that's the overall goal. So I would start my speech or this presentation by saying that in some capacity, which I did at the beginning of the speech. And then basically what that does is it prepares and primes and readies the listener to know, here's what I can expect from the speaker going forward. Hey, this presentation is about Chapter 2. And here's what we're going to cover. And I gave you a few things to think about, like the fact it's going to be brief. There's only 2 slides. So I give a quick synopsis or preview or a thesis statement, letting you know here is the overall goal and intent and purpose of this particular video. That's what you would do with your speeches. What you see on the slide below, compose a thesis statement, is just a quick way of better understanding how you get to a thesis statement. And you're going to start with a general purpose. What you're going to learn from this class is, if you look under number 3 where it says determine the purpose, there are normally going to be 3 general purposes that we're going to talk about in this class. It's going to be informative, so maybe you're giving a speech to inform. You may give a speech to persuade. That would be a persuasive speech, or your speech may be a part of a special occasion. So those are the 3 general purposes, either to inform, to persuade, or as a part of a special occasion. When you go from that general purpose, then you get to a specific purpose. For example, I may say, I am here to inform you. That's my general purpose. A specific purpose, I am here to present the information on chapter 2. The thesis statement then builds upon that. I am here to present the information on chapter 2 in order to better give you understanding of an overview of speech in hopes that it prepares you for Wednesday's class. In that particular thesis statement, I'm telling you everything you need to know. What I'm going to be speaking about and why I'm going to be speaking about it. The what and the why. And so you go from general to specific to the thesis statement. Number 6, you're going to develop some main points. And we're going to talk more about that at a later date also, not in detail. But one of my rules of thumb is I try to keep most of my speeches to 3 to 4 main points. Normally 3 is my go-to thing. If you only have one main point, that means your speech probably isn't worth speaking about, because if it only has one main, because a main point is like the main thing I want you to know. And normally you want them to know more than one main thing, or if not, the thing that you're speaking about probably isn't that relevant. So you want to give like evidence as to why they should listen. Here are 3 reasons why you should listen to this particular speech. Here are my 3 main points. Flip side is if you start getting 9 or 10 main points, the average person doesn't pay attention that long, and they're going to kind of lose focus, and you're going to lose your audience by just giving too much information. So my rule of thumb is, regardless if it's a 5-minute speech or a 45-minute speech, I'm still going to stick to 3 to 4 main points. If I got a 5-minute speech, each main point may be about a minute, and I'll have a short introduction to short conclusion. When I speak for 45 minutes, I don't say, well, let me do 10 main points. I just take those 3 main points, and instead of speaking for a minute each, I may now speak for 12 minutes each, and then have a longer introduction, a longer conclusion, and then some wriggle room in there also, just in case I get off on some small tangents. But the key is to not have too many main points, but to also have more than one main point. So you're going to pick your main points. Next, you're going to develop your introduction and conclusion. This is something that we often neglect. I've seen a lot of speeches where we put a lot of emphasis on the body, and the emphasis should be on the body, which is the bulk of the speech. But we do so to the detriment or neglect of the introduction and the conclusion. So people will get up there and they'll just kind of wing the introduction, and they get off to a slow start. They're stumbling, they're mumbling, they're not very confident. Now, once they get into the main points, things start getting rolling. But then when it comes to conclusion, all of a sudden they come to an abrupt end. And they say main point number 3, they talk about main point number 3, and after they're done talking, they say, that's all I have. I'm done. Well, that's not a conclusion. And so I think it's important that although we don't have to put as much time in the introduction and conclusion, we should put some time into the introduction and conclusion. And we want to do that to make sure we're starting off the right way and making sure that we end the right way also. Number 8, you're going to gather supporting material. And once again, for introduction, conclusion, as well as supporting material, there's going to be some chapters that we talk about later on that's going to talk about those things more in depth. But for now, just know that if we were to give the analogy that our speech was like a house, and you're building this house, some of the things we've already talked about would be the foundation, but supporting material would be like the I-beams, pillars, eventually walls. These are things that hold up the speech. These are things that hold up the roof, hold up the house. So you want to have supporting material, and we're going to talk more about what supporting material is. But it's basically the things that add to your speech. It adds either clarity, it adds interest, it adds credibility. So it makes your speech more credible, more believable, and more interesting, more understandable. And so that's going to be supporting material. Number 9, we're almost there. Number 9 is to prepare effective visual aids. And once again, there's going to be a chapter later on what are effective visual aids. But I think the key thing to break down about that is the words effective. Number 1, that communicates that not all visual aids are created equal. one of my philosophies is it's best to not have a visual aid than to have a poor visual aid. And so you don't want to, instead of having some nice photographs, you just draw some stick figures and you present that, or your PowerPoint slides and the text is all wrong and the color scheme is all wrong, or you show a video and it's blurry and the volume isn't that great. That in some ways can do more damage than it can good. It may just kill the credibility and the professionalism of your speech. So if you're going to have visual aids, make sure they are effective. And next is those two words, visual aid. Visual aid should actually visually, as in we should be able to see it, aid as in it should help your speech. And we're going to talk more about what a visual aid, some examples, but like I said, in general, these things should visually add to your speech. If they don't visually add to your speech, then it would probably be best to leave them out. And then finally is one that goes without saying, yet sometimes it goes without being done, and that is practice. This is something that a trap that a lot of us fall into when we have low pressure situations and we say, well, the speech tomorrow isn't that long, it's only 5 minutes, it's only going to be a handful of people, why practice? Or I know this stuff like the back of my hand, why practice? Even as someone who's been doing public speaking for decades, I still try to make sure I'm doing some level of practice. And I will admit that that level of practice does fluctuate based upon how long I'm speaking, based upon the extent of the speech, based upon the expectations. Is this a volunteers thing where I'm showing up for 5 minutes, or am I getting paid to speak for 40 minutes? That does change the level of preparedness. Well, it doesn't change the level of preparedness because I'm always going to be prepared. It changes the level of the work that I have to put in to be prepared. I don't have to prepare as much for a 5-minute speech. To be honest, I could almost get up there and have a few things in my mind and do 5 minutes fairly easy. I would have to prepare a little bit more to do 45 minutes. And so the level of preparedness is going to be pretty consistent. But what it takes to be prepared is going to change based upon the expectations, based upon the length of the speech, and the things of that nature. And so just to conclude, when in doubt, make sure you're practicing. Don't just go based upon your natural ability and get up there and just use your natural charisma. That could get you through a couple speeches, but sooner or later you want to make sure that you're putting in that work, that you're being a good steward over this natural ability. You know, we read in the Bible the parable of the talents. God gave certain talents, but he expects us to multiply and add to those talents. And one of the ways we do that in terms of public speaking and in terms of most things in our lives is to practice. One of my philosophies is what you do most is what you do best. So if you practice at something, you're going to do that thing very well. So I encourage you all to make sure you're practicing your speeches. So just a quick recap. First, you're going to analyze your audience. Then you're going to select your topic. You're going to determine your purpose. You're going to outline your speech. You're going to compose your thesis statement. You're going to develop your main points. You're going to have your introduction, conclusion. You're going to gather that supporting material. Then you're going to get those effective visual aids. And then you're going to practice. All right, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, this has been Professor Theo Williams for a presentation on Chapter 2. I am so hoping that the next time you hear my voice outside this video will be on Wednesday in class. That'll be a good time to ask me any questions that you may have about chapters 1 or 2. And then we're going to get back into what we need to get back into. So see you then. Be blessed. Take care.